United States government has 300 troops in Cameroon. Over 300 troops. And there's also a U.S. military air base in Cameroon that has 4 operational drones in it. In Cameroon. There's also 9 out of 10 people that's killed by American drones are not the intended targets, which makes me wonder who authorized those first 3 or so Yemenis that were killed by the first drone strike under the Trump presidency. Neither Trump nor Mattis nor anybody claimed responsibility for these Yemenis that was killed by a drone. I mean, even ISIS claims responsibility for shit they don't even commit. So I wonder who ordered those murders in Yemen, and I wonder if they were innocent people. And then I wonder if there's a way to hold our government accountable when these invisible ghost authorizations happen. Who did it? I guess if you can't point to a person, nobody did. So there's U.S. Armed Forces in Cameroon. We have U.S. Armed Forces in Nigeria too, with apparent permission from both governments, Cameroon and Nigeria, and seemingly to war with Boko Haram, who needs to go the way of the dodo. Fuck Boko Haram, okay? So we're in Cameroon and Nigeria with permission from their governments to war with Boko Haram. That's at least the apparent mission, right? We haven't authorized this war. There's been no declaration of war. I don't know the exact mission. If there is a mission statement, if there needs to be troop levels, need to be published, because all this information was found out by just some journalist that went to Cameroon asking questions. So we're at war in Cameroon and Nigeria, not against the governments of Nigeria and Cameroon, but against Boko Haram, at least for now. So we're in another nation. Our bodies, our boots are on the ground, plus our firepower, our air power. We're bombing and killing people. So yeah, that's a fucking war. It's a shadow war, apparently. Now, on July 5th, 2017, a few days ago, right at the armpit of Africa, in the Bight of Bonny, 97 indigenous Nigerians were killed by Cameroon gendarme officials in the Bakassi Peninsula, which is a disputed oil-rich territory situated between Nigeria and Cameroon. In the Bakassi Peninsula, by gendarme officials. Gendarmes, those are French police officers, or in French-speaking countries. They transcend the military and the police. They're both. So the gendarmes, these Cameroon officials, killed 97 people, 97 indigenous Nigerians. 2,000 Nigerian families were sacked by the Cameroon forces. 1,000 Bakassi indigenous peoples who were living in Abana were exiled and evicted. And 98% of Bakassi's residents suffer the same fate. July 5th, 2017, 3 days ago. And the reports came from 130 refugees of Bakassi who landed at the Ikang jetty, who managed to escape with their lives. Cameroon's gendarmes were demanding a $320 tax per adult. Now, it was 100,000 Nigerian dollars, whatever their currency is, but it equates to about $320. So the Cameroon officials, the gendarmes, are demanding this $320 tax per adult for boat engines. They were taxing the boat engines because that's the way that the Cameroon government taxes the fishing activities. So they tax the fishermen who have boats. And so there's a boat engine tax of $320. So Cameroon's official says, hey, you got to pay this tax. They warned them. The government of Cameroon warned the Nigerian Bakassi natives that the killings would happen if they didn't pay the tax. And that's what happened on July 5th. So the gendarmes, they're an armed police officer in France and other French-speaking countries. They're both military and police. The Cameroon gendarmes have been raping the women of Bakassi and the wives of the natives for years. The indigenous Nigerian peoples of Bakassi said that they've lived under constant harassment from the Cameroonian authorities since the International Court of Justice had declared that Bakassi was Cameroon territory instead of Nigerian in the year 2007. So for 10 years, you've had Cameroon's authorities, the gendarmes, who are raping the women of Bakassi. The government of Cameroon wouldn't let the Bakassi natives carry on with their lives and livelihood in peace. They wouldn't let the Bakassi natives go to the sea so they could fish, which is their main way to obtain sustenance. That's how they lived. They fished to eat so they could continue to live. The Cameroon government came into the Bakassi people's homes, demanding the $320 tax for each boat engine. And then when the people said that they didn't have any money, the Cameroon government started beating the Bakassi natives. And then they shot and killed 97 of them. And that's when the Bakassi natives fled. 2,000 families sacked. 1,000 displaced from Abana. 97 dead as a doornail. And that's 98%. 98% of Bakassi is now vacated, right? So Cameroon gets to keep Bakassi, the oil-rich territory, the oil-rich peninsula, right in the armpit. You got Africa, right? It's right there. And apparently, that's a good place for a pipeline, too. Like a Chad-Cameroon pipeline for oil. It's an interesting coincidence, isn't it? So the Cameroon government attackers, they sacked mainly Nigerians from Akwa Ibom, Cross River, and the Ondo states. From Akwa Ibom, the Cross River, and the Ondo states. Many others escaped at midnight with their fishing boats, and they arrived at Ikang and Bakassi and Ibaka and Akwa Ibom. The majority of those who are leaving are from the Mibo area. Our people there are mainly into fishing, and it is sad that the way they've been treated. This is not the agreement Nigeria had with Cameroon over the ceding of that area. So this isn't the agreement. In 2007, excuse me, in 2007, they had made the agreement. The International Court of Justice said that it was Cameroon's territory, but there was a 2003 Green Tree Agreement by the Nigerian-Cameroon Mixed Commission that stipulated that the Bakassi refugees must be properly resettled to their natural habitat so they can have a meaningful existence. The Green Tree Agreement, the 2005 Green Tree Agreement, states that Nigerians who chose to remain in Cameroon can do so without any molestation. The agreement makes it clear that there would be a committee monitoring the activities, but since the day the treaty was signed, Bakassi people have not seen any monitoring teams. So the Bakassi massacre, the killing and the sacking of the Nigerians in Bakassi, violates the 2003 Green Tree Agreement by the Nigerian Cameroon Mixed Commission. And this makes sense. So even if Cameroon was awarded that territory, you're going to displace the indigenous people. The only way you get away with replacing, displacing them is if you put them in a better spot, right? Where they are in where they're in a better spot so they can keep on living. You can't just take people's lands. They've been living there forever. And just because the International Court of Justice, and I'm curious about why they decided what they decided. I mean, that's right where that Chad-Cameroon pipeline is going, right there in the Gulf of Guinea, right there through Cameroon, right there through Bakassi. So they must have a meaningful living, right? And without molestation, they can stay in Cameroon. They were allowed to stay there. So digging up indigenous people up from their homelands. I mean, who would do such bullshit? The Cameroon forces were trained by the Israelis. There's 250 different tribes in Cameroon. Traditional dependence on the French defense capability, although reduced, continues to be the case as French military advisors remain closely involved in the preparing the Cameroonian forces for deployment to the contested Bakassi Peninsula. The armed forces numbered 14,200 personnel in ground, air, and naval forces. There are approximately 12,500 troops in the army across 3 military regions. Approximately 1,300 troops are part of the Cameroonian Navy, which is headquartered at Douala. Under 400 troops are part of the Air Force. There's an additional 9,000 paramilitary troops that serve as the gendarmerie, the policing force, or the reconnaissance role. So there's gendarmes. There's fucking gendarmes. And they said, what, 14,000, 12,000, 1,300, 9,000. So what is that? About 30 to 40,000 troops. So the Cameroonians have about 30 to 40,000 troops. They are being trained by the Israelis. They're being trained by the French. They also are being trained by the Chinese. Chinese has an ongoing military relationship with Cameroon. It includes training for the Cameroonian military students each year in China, technical advisors to assist in repairing Cameroonian military vehicles and naval vessels, and Chinese military sales. So, man, everybody's just interested in Cameroon, right? The U.S., China, France, and so the indigenous people, the Bakassi peoples, they call on the international community to intervene and address the lingering issues regarding their permanent resettlement. And they should. They have nobody else to go to. So the Bakassi natives, 97 of them who got massacred by the Cameroonian authorities, these gendarmes, so I don't know if it was the French or if it was just French, a French title, but it's going to take the international community. The international community is going to have to get the Bakassi people some justice, which means they're not going to get justice, right? They're on their own. There is no justice. It's just us. So Cameroon was a foreign word that means shrimp. Since shrimp was found in that region, that's why Cameroon is called Cameroon today. So the U.S. is mainly interested in exploiting oil reserves that border along Chad. The U.S. entered the war against Boko Haram in Cameroon after 1,200 Cameroonian civilians had already been killed by Boko Haram incursions from Nigeria. A top opposition politician had echoed the suspicion, stating that the United States has come to defend its interests, particularly as regards the Chad-Cameroon pipeline. And he was referring to the multi-billion-dollar World Bank finance project completed in 2003 that transports petroleum more than 600 miles from 3 Chadian oil fields to a floating oil facility in the Gulf of Guinea. The Gulf of Guinea, the armpit of Africa, the Bight of Bonny, the Bakassi Peninsula. The U.S. government should intervene. We should broker this deal through the United Nations. It was a United Nations agreement in 2007. This is because why the U.S. should intervene is because we are the world's policemen. This is the same shit that caused the Egyptian revolution. We backed Mubarak for 30 years, just like we back dictators all the time, like Saudi Arabia and Qatar right now, right? $120 billion arms deal, $15 billion arms deal. And we backed Mubarak for 30 fucking years, a military dictatorship, just like we're doing in Egypt right now, right? Egypt, which is a country located in the northeastern portion of Africa. The U.S. is the lone superpower in the world's policeman. And since this Bakassi massacre happened, it's going to be on the UN. The UN, you fucked up. You fucked up. You give it to Cameroon, and now Cameroon just killed 97 of the indigenous people. Did they have a place for them to go? No, they said, you got to pay this boat tax, or now you die. If you don't pay the boat tax, you die. That's genocide. That's a fucking massacre. That's horrible, okay? And we're doing this. It should be the United Nations to fix this. This is a mess for the United Nations, and ultimately, since it's up to the United Nations, that means it's up to the U.S. to fix this shit, because the UN is powerless without the U.S. Cameroon's government is headed by a corrupt, aloof, authoritarian, and brutal dictator, Paul Biya, who is loved by the French officials, since Paul Biya hangs out more in Paris than he does in his own home country, Cameroon. Now, Paul Biya has clung on the power of Cameroon for 35 years now, nearly as long as Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe. And he did it by conducting phony elections and then permission. Okay, then he used his system, Paul Biya did, of corrupt and autocratic power to use the legal and justice system to imprison and bankrupt dissidents, opposition leaders, and journalists. State permission is needed for public assembly, and there's also a secret police force that preys on college campuses. Paul Biya has amassed a personal fortune of more than $200 million, compared to the average Cameroonian income of $1,350 a year. $1,350 per year is how much the average Cameroonian makes. But Paul Biya has made more than $200 million. More than $2 million. Been in power for 35 years. Has phony elections, throwing dissidents, opposition leaders, journalists into prison and bankrupting them. This is fucked up. So, when we side with the government, we're in Cameroon right now by the permission of the government to go after Boko Haram. So some people might say, well, it's none of our business, but it is. We're in their country, and we're also in Nigeria too. So we could easily broker this. We should broker this. The United Nations is the one that had made this decision, right? They backed that International Court of Justice agreement in 2007. But we won't. We won't intervene. The Bakassi massacre is precisely what the U.S. government wants. We want to protect that Chad-Cameroon pipeline. So some of the natives were blocking the full ownership of Bakassi by the Cameroonian government, and now they have pushed 98% of these Bakassi natives out. So now there's nobody to intervene in this oil-rich territory where the Chad-Cameroon pipeline goes through. So, though both Nigeria and Cameroon were suffering at the hands of Boko Haram, a long-running territorial dispute blocked efforts to coordinate strategy. They weren't, in the 80s and 90s, they were fighting the oil-rich Bakassi Peninsula. As a territory along the Gulf of Guinea, it straddles both countries, was the object of repeated clashes between their armies in the 1980s and 1990s. 2007, the International Court of Justice, backed by the United Nations, ordered Nigeria to cede sovereignty to Cameroon. Though Nigeria withdrew its forces, it regarded the surrender as a humiliation and a violation of its own constitution. Nigeria's popular Guardian newspaper called the forced secession a rape, and relations between Cameroon and Nigeria sunk to a low point. At the Ikang beach, there was a picture of abandoned and traumatized people, the 130 refugees that came from the Bakassi massacre of 2017, July 5th, 2017. Most of them remained at the jetty looking disillusioned and rejected, while a few women with their babies and children moved into the Ikang village for shelter. The Bakassi IDPs in the latest returns. The refugees have accused the Cross River state government and federal government of playing politics with their lives and the means of their livelihood. Chief Uma Inyang, who spoke Efik, recounted their ordeal. The Cameroonian gendarmes have been harassing us so much. They destroy our things, destroy our boats, beat us up, and shoot many of us to death. They make a lot of trouble for us in Akpan-Kanya and Bakassi. We had to leave suddenly, and so many people missed their children and members of their families. We got to this Ikang jetty around 2 a.m. today. They even raped our wives. Many of our people have been held captive there. They have killed about 70 or 97 people. Many people ran into the bush. Many are scattered along the waterways. We came in all these boats you're seeing here. We were over 2,000 who were scattered over there. At least 94 were killed in Adabong, where we were. We don't know about the other areas. We were hearing gunshots all over the place. We have about 137 who landed here in Ikang. The number has actually grown because we were 132 when we first got here, and the immigration officials are registering us. So at 2 a.m., July 6th, Thursday, that's when they arrived at the Ikang jetty. The refugee, Mr. Nasi Okan from the Akpan-Kanya and Albana, said, they destroyed everything. In 2008, they killed 3 people who worked with me. The government should come to our aid and resettle us properly in our own country this time around. They came and told me to pay the $320 tax for this engine, and I said I did not have that kind of money, and that is why they started to beat us. And then they also note that they cannot survive upland because they're all fishermen. and they didn't go to school. So they should resettle the people and create alternatives for them to survive. They're calling for the international community to do something. It's up to the U.S., it's up to the United Nations to do something, and we're there. We have military bases. We got wars in Nigeria and in Chad and in Cameroon and Somalia and Libya and Egypt, and 20 to 30 actually different shadow wars. The U.S. drone base in Cameroon is actually in the north part of Cameroon. Bakassi massacre. This happened in the southern portion. But the U.S. drone base in Cameroon, it's a high-cost, high-tech military enterprise in a very poor, underdeveloped country in Africa. The U.S. drone base became fully operational for several years now. So two or 3 years they've been operating. They host a fleet of 4 Gray Eagle drones, a successor to the original Predator drone manufactured by General Atomics. The 4 drones, which carry out surveillance missions in rotation 24 hours a day, allow U.S. intelligence analysts to gather detailed information about Boko Haram's movements, bomb-making factories, and military camps, and share it with a multinational force of 8,700 African troops that is now spread across the Lake Chad Basin. Another twist to all this, right? So we have a drone base in Cameroon. Now, another twist to this entire Bakassi massacre was that before the 2007 International Court of Justice ruling that ruled in favor of Cameroon owning the Bakassi Peninsula, in 2006, on July 9th, 2006, so this would be the 11th year anniversary tomorrow, Bakassian leaders had declared their independence. They announced their secession as an independent nation, right? July 9th. This is just right at 5 days after the U.S. celebrates their Independence Day. And so Bakassi declared their independence July 9th, 2009. And they declared themselves the Democratic Republic of Bakassi. The Democratic Republic of Bakassi was made up of Southern Cameroonians under the aegis of Southern Cameroon's People's Organization, the Bakassi Movement for Self-Determination, and the Movement for the Emancipation of the Niger Delta. But apparently those groups were not strong enough to enforce their sovereignty. So, this is one of many shadow wars. This is how Vietnam started. You pepper a few military advisors, a couple drones here and there. Just put 300. Let's just put 300 military troops in Cameroon. Okay, so we start out with a little bit, and then we get more entrenched, and then we're putting thousands, and then it's a full-on fucking war. So that's how Vietnam started under Truman and Eisenhower, who put just a little bit, peppered just a few advisors, and then by JFK and LBJ and Nixon, it was a full-fledged fucking war. 4 million Vietnamese people died, 75,000 American troops. And for what? Every fucking death in Vietnam was done in vain. So all these shadow wars, we got 20 to 30 shadow wars in Africa, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, Cameroon, Libya, Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo, Chad, and that's just the drone base in Garua in Cameroon. Cameroon represents the expansion of America's stealth war against jihad in Africa. There's drones that are being flown from the bases of Djibouti, which is the center of U.S. drone operations on the continent. It's actually the center for AFRICOM, for our entire African forces, Djibouti, as well as Ethiopia and Kenya, in addition to ships off the coast of East Africa. You have Predator MQ-1 drones and their larger cousins, MQ-9 Reapers, which have been based in Niamey in Niger, N'Djamena in Chad, and the Seychelles International Airport. And there's going to be a lot more. The United States National Defense Authorization Act for 2016 had appropriated $50 million for the construction of an airfield and base camp in Agadez, Niger, to support operations in Western Africa. So that was 2016, right? $50 million, so we could keep on financing these shadow wars in Africa. They say we're there for Boko Haram. It's not written down on paper. And we do oil. I mean, we seem to care about those nations that are sitting on a shit ton of oil. That's when we really give a shit about it. Our government really cares then. Bakassi is an oil-rich peninsula that Chad-Cameroon pipeline is going down the middle of it, and so that's wonderful. That's perfect for, right, the American interest. If we're able to buy the oil in peace without those damn natives, you know, just like in the Dakota Access Pipeline or the Keystone Pipeline. I come across an article that said that Britain and Germany wanted a pipeline right through the same area, I think. And that's what the entire war, World War I was, or through the Balkans or some shit. So these pipelines in Afghanistan, you know, people are willing to fucking die and kill for them, you know. It's crazy. I mean, it's good for efficiency's sake and whatnot, but who's making the money? Who's actually benefiting from these big-ass pipelines? Certainly not the indigenous people. They might get a few, you know, some gas in their cars, but if they can't even, they make $13.50 a year. I mean, do they even have cars? Do they even have gasoline? So you have this fucking pipeline that goes through poor tribes. It's no good. It's no good for the indigenous people. So they are in the right for protesting and standing up for it. If there is a way to make the pipeline beneficial for all the people, then you'll have the support of the people. But as long as you know, fucking force these damn pipelines for a bunch of oil executives. It's once been said that the United States government is just one big oil company with a military. We're a big oil company with a military. Now we do, you know, there's other reasons for wars. Helen of Troy, right? The fucking Trojan War was over a woman. And it's Boko Haram, right? So that's the pretense of why we're there. And there's opposition politicians that berate the U.S. presence, but then the ones who accepted it, the governments who have accepted it, basically are like, look, America is the fucking world's policeman. We should welcome their forces here. We welcome the Americans here. And so, you know, since we're the fucking empire, we should operate in a very professional and respectful manner, so that way we set a good example for the rest of the world. So, yeah. It's fucking bullshit that the Cameroonian government killed all those people in the Bakassi Peninsula, all those Nigerians. It could set off a fucking war between these two governments, and the UN and the US should intervene. They should intervene. The Bakassi people are calling for them to intervene. So, I hope they do.